OpenAI are choosing to behave like supervillains and they are laughing in our faces while they do it. It is so obvious it would be funny if it wasn't so dangerous. They have recently backed a bill in Illinois that would shield them from any liability whatsoever if their model kills over 100 people. So in the same breath, some of them will say, oh, these concerns about our models going rogue and killing people, they're not worth paying attention to. They're not real. It's from people who don't understand the technology and are just fear-mongering. Well, why would you care if you were held liable if your model goes on to kill 100 people? Because according to you who deny the risks, that's not going to happen. So these people lying through their teeth, once again, it is so obvious. So just to repeat, they want to be shielded from liability if their model kills over 100 people or causes at least $1 billion in property damages. If your model does that, you should be held responsible for it, given that you don't know how your technology works. They're massive black boxes that you do not understand, and you don't know how to make sure that they don't have dangerous capabilities and that they don't act in dangerous ways when they are let loose. When it comes to OpenAI, their messaging on everything is just so inconsistent with each other, and it's so obvious that they are lying to one group of people when it suits their interest, and then they will go and turn around and lie to another group of people when it suits their interest in that situation. So OpenAI are one of the companies that lobbied in favor of the federal government banning all states from being able to regulate AI themselves. And they said that's because they want to avoid a patchwork of inconsistent state requirements that could restrain innovation in some way. They say this, they say we don't want a patchwork of state regulations, but then they will support the only bill in state legislature that is in their favor, that's in their interest. So they don't give a shit about whether it's states regulating AI or whether it's the federal government regulating AI. If the bills are in their favor, they are all for it. And OpenAI are fighting a losing battle. 90% of the people in Illinois oppose this, as they obviously should. It is ridiculous that the companies building the most transformative technology of all time would not be held liable if their model goes on to kill 100 people. Even if you think those risks are far-fetched, I don't, the experts don't. There's a lot of evidence that AI models are getting better and better and that a disaster like that could happen pretty soon. But even if you think these risks will not materialize, well, there's no harm in having these laws in place that would punish AI companies if their models were to do something like that, right? Anthropic are actually on the other end of OpenAI, and they are opposing OpenAI's attempt to shield AI companies from liability here, as they rightly should. But I don't think Anthropic deserve much credit for this because it is just bare minimum stuff, right? One very revealing thing is if you look at the statements of Sam Altman 2 or 3 years ago, he was saying this technology is very dangerous. We need regulation. And now, what do they say are their priorities when it comes to regulation, when it comes to how this technology should be governed? Well, they say, we hope these state laws will inform a national framework that will help ensure the US continues to lead, right? That is their North Star when it comes to policy, and it's not keeping people safe, right? And we saw in an article that we're going to read in a little bit that Sam Altman actually lied to the US government all the way back in 2017 to try and claim that China were way further ahead in AI development than they actually were. And he wanted to manufacture this race that did not actually exist at the time in order to get more funding and have a laissez-faire approach to AI regulation that allows him to run away with everything and make as much money as he can, right? So this beating China narrative is complete bullshit, not least because what does it mean to beat China when you're building AI models that are better than all humans, everything that you don't know how to control? If anyone does that, most experts think there's a significant chance that everyone dies, right? So who benefits from that race? The answer is nobody. The answer is it's a stupid race, it's suicidal, and no one should be engaged in it because it's not a race that you can actually win. OpenAI know that they're losing public support, especially after this New Yorker article was released recently that revealed lots of previously unseen documents, revealing how Sam Altman has been a liar, has deceived his employees, and has had this unwavering pursuit of power ever since he founded OpenAI. OpenAI are losing their public relations battle. It is very hard to market this technology to the public and get them to be on your side when you're literally trying to build something that replaces them and probably kills them all, right? That's not a PR battle that I think is actually winnable. But of course, OpenAI are going to try. They're going to give it a bloody good go. So this article says AI giants go on charm offensive to avert public backlash. And we see an image of a Pause AI protest here. Well, hey, well done, guys. So OpenAI published a list of policy proposals that include things like a 4-day work week and an AI invested public wealth fund distributed to citizens. They're saying that, yeah, we're going to have this technology. We're going to be having the world's major companies paying us to use our models after we've replaced all human workers. But don't worry, we'll use some of our money to pay you and make sure that you can live. We should not trust these people. Once we no longer matter in the economy, once our labor no longer gives us leverage over politicians and over corporate billionaires, then we are at the whim of their decisions. And that's a really dangerous position to be in. So one AI regulation advocate makes a very good point that previously OpenAI have just been kind of had this blanket opposition to any AI regulation, but they know that is a completely untenable position. So they've said, what's the best move? If you can't oppose all regulation, well, it's to place yourself in the driver's seat. And that's what every single one of them is doing. So they want to appear to the public and to politicians that they take the need for regulation seriously. So they will be proposing all of these things. Like we've seen Anthropic set up the Public Action First Super PAC, which is going to lobby for various regulations, some of which is probably good, but at the same time, they're never going to advocate for what is actually needed, which is for the race that these companies are so recklessly engaged in to be stopped. And one of the ways OpenAI is trying very hard to try and win back the public conversation here is by purchasing one of the biggest tech podcasts in the world. So OpenAI have purchased the TBPN podcast, which I think is the most popular tech podcast that exists. And of course, this raises a lot of questions about editorial independence. I'd be very surprised if from here on out, TBPN were to publish anything that is critical of OpenAI. And the man who's going to be in charge of this relationship is none other than Chris Lehane, who, if you don't know who he is, very important to understand this figure, and we'll get into him a little bit later. So he's denying that OpenAI purchasing this podcast will lead to any change in output. He says, we want to let these guys cook. This guy's like in his mid-40s or older. I don't think he has the right to say let these guys cook, but whatever. But I think this line is quite revealing. So he says, we want to let them deliver those ideas, but to bigger and bigger audiences, particularly as it becomes more and more important to explain the how and why behind AI. What I think he means by that subconsciously is as AI becomes increasingly politically important, and the studies show that it is the fastest rising issue in terms of political importance, we need to control the narrative. We need to stop the warnings of the experts becoming widespread knowledge, and we need to impose our view of things, our narrative, which is there's nothing to worry about, which of course is complete bollocks. Of course there is something to worry about when you're building AI that could be smarter than all humans. That is a very scary technology to build, and you should be under a lot of scrutiny, and there should be a lot of regulation, a lot more than there is now. We'll get into the figure that is Chris Lehane. Very important to understand him. But just before, if you're watching this video, I'm trying to grow this channel. I'm trying to be a voice for those of us who are concerned about the extinction threat of AI, which is something that is increasingly covered by mainstream media, but nowhere near enough. And it's really important that we get this message out, that we let people know the threat to their lives, and we give people an opportunity to learn about it and then do something about it. I always leave links in my description for people to take action by contacting their political representatives or joining Pause AI. I'll continue to do that. So if you like the idea behind this channel, make sure you subscribe and follow along. Chris Lehane has been around a lot throughout his career, and he led the crypto industry's effort in 2022 to ensure that there was no regulation of their industry and that politicians were afraid to take them on. So Chris Lehane, because of his tactics in politics, he's known as the master of the political dark arts, and OpenAI hired him about a year ago now precisely to do that, because they know that they need someone to play dirty, because they can't win on a fair level playing grounds. They can't win with arguments and reason. They have to play dirty. Now, one of the things that's happened since Chris Lehane has come in is the death of Adam Rain, who was one of the many teenagers who have taken their own lives after conversations with ChatGPT. Chris Lehane thought it'd be a good idea to subpoena the funeral of Adam Rain, and they demanded access to the guest list, to all of the videos and eulogies from the funeral. I don't know if this has any kind of precedent in other industries, but this seems like obviously just so immoral to me. Why would you try and demand access to the guest list of the funeral of a teenager that your product had a part in killing? Seemed really weird, really evil. And this is the guy that Chris Lehane is. So Chris Lehane recently did an interview with the San Francisco Standard, which covered the recent violent attack on Sam Altman's house, which is completely immoral and wrong. And I just did a video condemning it. And Chris Lehane is trying to blame the experts and academics who have warned about the existential threat of AI for this attack, which is not fair. If there is this risk, as there is in many other industries, you should talk about it. Now, because there are mentally unstable people that will go out to commit violent attacks on the back of that, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't talk about it. Yes, you should be clear in your messaging that violence is not the answer. You should offer people a peaceful political solution. But to just pretend that the risk doesn't exist, pretend that the problem doesn't exist because someone might wrongly conclude that violence is the answer is not adequate, right? I'm sure there have been people who have committed violence in the name of climate activism. That doesn't mean that climate scientists shouldn't warn about climate change. So here we go. Chris Lehane comes out and calls those who are warning about the existential threat of AI, he calls us doomers, which is just a very weird word. And he says we have a very negative, dark view of humanity. How is that the case? We are literally saying that we believe humanity can come together, face one of the biggest threats it's ever faced, like we did with nuclear proliferation, and sign international treaties to prevent the development of superintelligence, right? That is an incredibly optimistic view of humanity, and it is something that I believe can happen, and that is what I'm advocating for. The people who have a dark, negative view of humanity are the people who say, it's really hard to talk to each other, so let's just give up and give over control of the world to a superintelligent AI because it's too hard to do diplomacy, it's too hard to sign international treaties. They are the people who have a dark view of humanity, the people who are calling for international treaties, who are calling for cooperation, who are calling for humanity to step up and be wiser than we currently are being. We are the people who have a positive view of humanity, and we're the people who are fighting to actually keep humanity around. It's the Chris Lehanes of the world who want to accelerate AI as fast as possible, who are threatening the lives of every human on the planet. And then he has the brass neck to come out and say that we're not offering solutions. What are you talking about? We offer solutions. There are many politicians, many groups across the world who are proposing regulation to try and rein in your recklessness, and you then spend loads of money to lobby against it. So it's just absurd. They're so laughably evil, these people. I don't know how they keep getting away with it. I think the polling shows that the public are clearly pissed off with the likes of Chris Lehane, the likes of OpenAI, and they want the governments to step in. They are losing the battle. They will continue to lose it as long as we continue to speak up about it. And Chris Lehane, mate, give your head a wobble. Do you want to wake up tomorrow as the man that is at the forefront of accelerating humanity's extinction? I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want my family knowing that's what I'm doing. And I would really struggle to sleep at night if that's what I was engaged in. But, you know, maybe you're not someone who cares about the consequences of their actions. It seems like you don't, given the actions that you have engaged in so far. I believe everyone has a chance at salvation. Chris Lehane, maybe his time's running out, but maybe he can wake up tomorrow and decide to not be a cunt. But it's up to him.